Some people, after they die, return to the soil. Others remain just as they were for centuries. In the depths of Anatolia, mummies have been found that have remained intact for hundreds of years. In Aksaray, babies, adults, and even a cat hidden beneath churches. And in Amasya, rulers and their families dating back 700 years. There is one among them whose blue eyes still attract attention today. So how were these people preserved? How are they different from the mummies in Egypt? And how, despite so many centuries passing, are their faces still visible? Today, we will look into one of the most fascinating and least known secrets of Anatolia. You can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Now let's begin with those silent faces hidden in the deep valleys of Aksaray. When you descend into Ihlara Valley, the atmosphere suddenly changes. High cliffs, ancient churches, and an unsettling silence. This place was once also known as the Valley of Mummies. Between the 10th and 12th centuries, people placed their dead in graves under churches and in rooms carved into the rocks. To this day, around 13 mummies have been found here. Among them are babies, children, adults, and even a cat. Yes, they even preserved their cats in the same way. So how did they manage this? After death, they removed the internal organs and then covered the body with melted wax. Afterwards, they wrapped it in shrouds and cloth and placed it into the tomb. As time passed, the body dried and remained intact for many years. This method was quite different from mummification in Egypt. The Egyptians followed a much longer and more complex process. They removed the brain through the nose, opened the abdominal cavity to take out most internal organs while leaving the heart in place. Then they dried the body with special salts, filled the cavities with resin and various materials, and wrapped it in layers of linen bandages. This process took weeks. In Anatolia, a different method was used. Organs were removed, but wax and cloth were considered sufficient for preservation. Long drying processes or filling the body cavity were not applied. It seems the climate of the region and the materials used were enough for preservation. When you look closely at one of those baby mummies today, it is truly astonishing. Its skin, facial features, and fingers can still be clearly seen. It looks as if it closed its eyes not centuries ago, but quite recently. Alongside adult mummies, beads, fabric pieces, and small oil lamps were also found. This suggests that people did not want to send their loved ones alone. And perhaps the most interesting detail is this. Among the mummies found in the valley, there is also a cat. This shows that people preserved not only their loved ones, but also the animals they valued in the same way. Today, all these mummies are exhibited under special protection in the Aksaray Museum. When you stand in front of those faces behind glass, you cannot help but think about the centuries that have passed. But the mummies of Anatolia are not limited to Ihlara Valley. Hundreds of kilometers to the north, among mountains and historical structures, there are equally impressive mummies. Now we turn our route to Amasya. Between the mountains rising along the Yeşilırmak River and structures carrying the traces of centuries, some of the most remarkable mummies of Anatolia are hidden. These mummies, belonging to Ilkhanid-era nobles and their families from the 14th century, were found in the crypt beneath the Fethi Mosque. There are 8 mummies in total. Among them are nobles, women, and children. 4 of them are children, but one of them stands out in particular, a blue-eyed baby. Even after nearly 700 years, its eyes are still visible. This is why it has become one of the most attention-grabbing remains for museum visitors. The preservation methods are also quite different. In Ihlara, internal organs were removed, but here there was no need for that. The organs were left in place. Instead, wax, resin, vegetable oils, salt, and various local materials were used. Since they were preserved without bandages, facial features, teeth, hair, and even nails can still be seen. While in Egypt, the body was emptied for preservation, here a much more natural method was preferred. These mummies were later discovered by treasure hunters. Unfortunately, some were damaged during excavation. Despite this, the surviving examples are still remarkably well preserved. Today, they are exhibited under special protection in the Amasya Museum. When you enter the room, the first thing you notice is silence. The people standing in front of you may have lived 700 years ago, yet their faces are still visible. And what is interesting is this. The mummies in Aksaray and the mummies in Amasya were preserved with completely different methods, yet both have managed to survive the centuries and reach the present day. So how do these methods compare to the world's most famous mummies? The Byzantine-era mummies in Aksaray and the Ilkhanid-era mummies in Amasya. There are centuries between them. Their beliefs are different, their eras are different, yet both are preserved on the same Anatolian soil. In Egypt, mummification was a long and complex process. Internal organs were removed, the brain was extracted through special methods, the body was dried with salt for days, then filled with resins and wrapped in layers of linen bandages. The main purpose was to preserve the body for the afterlife. In Anatolia, a different approach is seen. In Aksaray, internal organs were removed, but preservation was achieved with wax and cloth. In Amasya, organs were not touched at all. Wax, resin, vegetable oils, and various local materials were used instead. In other words, long procedures like in Egypt, or body emptying and refilling techniques, were not applied here. Despite this, the results are quite impressive. Even after centuries, facial features can still be seen, hair is visible, and some bodies remain in surprisingly good condition. Mummies are found in different parts of the world. However, these examples in Anatolia are considered quite unique in terms of the methods used. It is as if these lands chose to preserve their dead in their own way. When you look at those faces behind glass in museums today, you can see the traces of time. And perhaps the most striking thing is this. The faces of people who lived centuries ago are still in front of us. Belki de bu yüzden bu mumyalar yalnızca arkeolojik kalıntılar olarak görülmüyor. Çünkü onların yüzlerine baktığında karşında sadece bir beden değil, bir zamanlar yaşamış bir insanın sessiz hikayesi duruyor. And this story leaves us with one final question. The forgotten mummies of Anatolia still lie in the deep valleys of Aksaray and the mountains of Amasya, in silence. Each comes from a different era. They belong to different people, but they all share one thing. They have resisted time for centuries. They were preserved using very different methods from the long and complex mummification rituals of Egypt. On one side, the Ihlara mummies preserved with wax and cloth. On the other, the Amasya mummies preserved naturally without removing internal organs. All reflect the unique methods of Anatolia. Despite the passing centuries, that blue-eyed baby still draws attention. Faces, hands, and small details can still be seen today. Perhaps they wanted to be preserved so they would not be forgotten. Or perhaps it was a tradition of their time. The exact answer is never fully known. But one thing we do know: they are still there. Even after all these centuries, they wait in silence. And they remind every visitor of the same question: what really remains after a person dies? If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think was the real reason these people were preserved? A tradition, a belief, or a reflection of the cultural understanding of their time? I will read every comment one by one. In the next documentary, we'll meet again on my channel Chasing the Truth, exploring other traces lost in time.